Hey, what's up guys? My name is StevieWunderKid and welcome back to another GTA 5 car replica build. In this video we're going to be recreating Jesse Pinkman's 1982 Chevy Monte Carlo that appeared in the first and the beginning of the second season of the Breaking Bad TV show. Today we're going to be recreating his OG lowrider using the brand new Declasse Tahoma Coupe that was just added to GTA 5 today, December 16th, 2022. Now before we get started with this build, I want to have one major disclaimer, and that's that the new Tahoma Coupe is actually based off of a third generation Monte Carlo, whereas Jesse's was actually a fourth gen Monte Carlo. Now, because this is the case, for the sake of this build, you could also utilize the Willard Faction Custom to recreate Jesse's car if you wanted to, and you can use a lot of the same modifications that I show in this video for the Tahoma Coupe. The Faction, although it is based off of a Buick Regal, still does look very close to Jesse's Monte Carlo, almost more so than the Tahoma Coupe, and it also is much cheaper and has access to the lowrider modifications. So if you wanted to choose that car, you also could. However, because the Tahoma Coupe was just added and is actually free until December 18th, 2022, I figured I'd get this build out there for anybody who wanted to try it for themselves. Now, if you are able to snag the Tahoma Coupe for free, then the aesthetic modifications are the only cost you'll be paying for this build, and that's around $100,000 or even less than that, depending on what you have unlocked. But if you buy the Tahoma Coupe at its normal price of $1.5 million, then you'll be spending about $1.6 million in total, which is super steep. So I'll leave that decision to you guys on what car you want to use, but if you want to continue with the Tahoma Coupe, then we're going to get right into the aesthetic modifications now. So with that in mind, first off in the bumper section, we're going to go right in. For the front bumpers, we're just going to leave it stock. Just as kind of a preface, a lot of the body on this car is going to remain stock, so it's pretty easy to do. Moving on to rear bumpers, we're also going to leave the stock rear bumper. That's really about it. Moving back out, next up we have the exhaust, and for this we're just going to leave that stock exhaust as you guys can see there. There wasn't any rear exit exhaust on Jesse's car, at least as far as I could see, so leaving it the kind of swept rear exit stock exhaust here is the best option. So that's all done. Next up for the hood, once again the hood is completely stock. That's about it. Next up, horn, that's up to you. For the lights, first off for the headlights, we're going to leave these stock lights as you guys can see here. And then for the neons, Jesse's car didn't have any neons, so we're just going to leave those off. Next up, we have the livery, and for this, unfortunately, there's really no option to get the subtle white pinstripes on Jesse's car, so we're just going to leave it off. In reality, if there was something like the red vines, but in white, that would look very close, and I'd probably do that, but because we don't have the option to do that, and the classic white pinstripes is kind of all over the car, there's really no good match there for the livery, so we're just going to leave it off, and just focus on that beautiful candy red that I'll get to in a couple minutes. But yeah, livery, just leave it off. Next up for the mirrors, we're going to leave those stock mirrors as you guys can see there. Alright, so next up we have the license plate. Originally I had the yellow on black, but I decided to switch it to the blue on white one because I think the style of this plate is more classic and kind of matches up with the New Mexico plate a bit better that was on Jesse's car. And then obviously if you want to go a step further and do the custom text, then it is the Cap'n, an abbreviation for captain, so it's the word the and then CAPN. So that's another option if you have access to either the iFruit app, I know it was just taken down, but if you have some way to change your plate, if you want to go all in, then that is the plate that's on Jesse's car, and I think the blue on white one is the most classic match you're going to get to that. Next up for the respray, this is kind of the main aspect of this build. So first off for the primary color, we're going to go into metallics, and I don't know why it unselects it every time, but we're going to do a metallic red base. This is a bright enough red in my opinion that it allows you to have a pearlescent that's kind of not muted by how bright the base color is. If you chose something like a Torino to start, then you really wouldn't be able to see the pearlescent because like the metallic base is just so bright. So to allow for a little bit of metallic to be seen there, I chose a metallic red base. And then for the pearl, I chose a candy red. A lot of people and a lot of builds that I've seen out there on YouTube chose like an orange pearlescent almost, and that's mainly because a lot of the time you see Jesse's car in the TV show, it's either dirty or the lighting's off. I'll flash up a picture on the screen here of what the car actually looks like in a museum, and that's where you can kind of see the color in the right light. You can pretty clearly see that there's almost like a candy-ish effect in that red, so that's why I chose the candy red here. I think the candy red brightens it up a little bit, and I think it gets it as close as possible to the color on Jesse's car in the TV show, so we're going to run that for the pearl. And then for the secondary color that actually doesn't matter, if you haven't chosen any secondary parts that it doesn't really affect anything, but just to match it up, I chose a metallic red once again. And then for the trim color, here's where there's two different options. So the option I've chose right now is actually the Bison Brown. There were actually two versions of this car that were used in the show. In the first season, they actually rented the Monte Carlo that Jesse used, and that car had a gray interior. So for recreating that gray version of the interior, if you go all the way to the top here, I think either the black steel or the dark steel would work if you wanted to recreate that version of the car from the first season. I think either of these colors would get you close to the gray interior of Jesse's car. But in the second season, they actually bought a Monte Carlo and built it up to make it look almost identical to the one in the first season, and that car had a brown interior. So to recreate that brown look, I actually chose the Bison Brown. I think this color looks amazing in pretty much any interior, and I think it fits this car very well, and it's also kind of the best shade of brown to choose in my opinion. Every other brown just honestly looks like poop, to be honest. So I think the Bison Brown is probably the best match if you're gonna go for that brown version of the interior. Moving back out for the roof, we're gonna leave the stock roof as you guys can see there. That's about it for the splitters. Once again, stock splitter. And then moving back out, suspension, this is kind of, you have two major options for this, either the competition or the stock. Unfortunately, Jesse's car, although it is a lowrider in the show, we don't have options for any of the kind of hydraulic suspension in GTA. I really wish this car was a Benny's car. It's really disappointing that the Tahoma Coupe is not a Benny's car. I think Rockstar kind of tricked everybody into thinking that when they showed the first picture of it, but anyways, to be able to get that kind of lowrider slammed look, I chose the competition suspension. I think this looks really good, and I think it really matches the lowrider aesthetic. Either that, or if you're just thinking of the car in kind of its stock form when it's fully lifted, you could use the stock suspension too. Maybe, hopefully, they'll add a Benny's upgrade for this in the future. I don't really know, but one can dream, I guess. That's kind of Rockstar's move. But yeah, either stock or competition suspension is your best bet for this. Alright, so one of the last modifications here is the wheels, and there's actually two main ways you can approach this. So obviously we're going to choose the lowrider rims so we can get access to those nice white wall tires. So there's two main ways to approach this, either going into stock and you can choose the big worm rims and then you can paint those to match the red on the body, or you could go with the fully chrome big worm rims. Now, if you look at pictures of Jesse's car, as it turns out, the rims on his car were actually, the centers were chrome, like the spokes were chrome, and then there was a red kind of like wing nut looking thing over the lug nuts, and then the barrels were actually red and then chrome on the very outside. Unfortunately, we can't achieve that amount of detail with the rims here in GTA, so you have two main options. As I said, you can either go fully chrome and again choose the big worm rims. I think these are the best in terms of styling. They're the best match for the spokes, and they also have that little wing nut over top. So you can use fully chrome big worm rims, or you can go to the stock and you can choose the big worm rims once again. And then what you can do is you can back out of here and then you can paint those rims red, as you guys can see. I'm personally not a huge fan of the way this looks, and it doesn't match the primary color perfectly. I think it's a little bit darker, so I chose to stay away from these and I just went back to the fully chrome big worm rims. As you guys can see here, I think these look a lot cleaner, so either of those two options would work. I think they're equally as close. Obviously there's not as much red reflected in these chrome rims, but I think they just look a bit cleaner here in the game. But those are the two main options there. And then for the tires, for the tire design, obviously we are going to throw on the custom tires so we can get those nice white walls, and then everything else there, that's up to you. And last but not least, we have the window tints, and for this I just went with the light smoke to match the kind of light darkened tint on Jesse's car. In reality, it was just the back windows and the quarter windows that were tinted on his car, but that's really not an option in GTA, so we're just going to go with the overall light smoke. So that's really about everything to recreate Jesse's Monte Carlo from the Breaking Bad TV show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this build and found it helpful. If you guys did, feel free to leave a like on the video and comment any feedback below. And also leave any suggestions for future replica builds that you'd like to see. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this build once again, or are enjoying the new update, and I will see you all in the next video.